Welcome to today's episode of the CIO Water Cooler TV. I'm lucky to be joined by Stuart Moss from Rolls-Royce. How are you today, Stuart?
I'm fine, thank you. Not doing too bad.
Just before we get into anything else and the actual subject of today's conversation, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the role that you perform at Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, so I'm the head of IT innovation for Rolls-Royce. So that's part of our group IT function. And I suppose all the answer, the kind of the answers in the title really. All of our innovation projects, all of our things that are a bit out of the ordinary, they pretty much come across my desk. I'm responsible for all of that.
And not just out of the ordinary in terms of what Rolls-Royce are doing, but out of the ordinary in terms of how can we help the community? How can we help wider society? Because we're here to talk to you a little bit about I Will Always Be Me. And we've decided to split this interview into two sections. So a little bit about what I Will Always Be Me is. We'll come back to that in more detail, but also how it's come about in terms of the organizations that you've had to work with to make it happen. So look, before we jump into that, let's set some context. When I say I Will Always Be Me, what is that?
So I Will Always Be Me is a vehicle, if you like. It's actually behind me there. But it's a book which is intended to help people with motor neurone disease to bank their voice. So that's a technology where you can make a synthetic copy of the sound of your voice that you can use at a later date with assistive devices so they sound like you.
And we mentioned that, your job is about, the slightly more unusual kind of work that might fall across someone's desk. And this definitely fits into that for obvious reasons. But it was born out of a community outreach program. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I suppose I've worked in various different areas in the Rolls-Royce Group. And when I moved into the IT function, I just asked a very simple question, which was, what do we do as an outreach project in this particular part of the company? And at the time, it was, I suppose, a bit of a quizzical look came back and, maybe embarrassed sideways glances of there's nothing that we do on a particularly organised way. So as happens in a lot of corporations, if you bring up the problem, you get the chance to fix it, don't you? So I took the opportunity and was actually told, if you've got a good idea for this, let's try it. Let's shoot for the stars, right? That's when I asked what the limitations were. Do what you like, which I think was quite trusting at the time. And so I suggested, as with many corporations nowadays, an IT function is partly outsourced, if not wholly outsourced in some organisations. Rolls-Royce's IT is supported by numerous big tech companies, so the likes of Microsoft, Dell, Intel, that sort of ecosystem of partners. And so I suggested, why don't we do something to help people with motor neurone disease? Because it's a particularly not well-served community. And I said to do something different, rather than it be some of the things that we've done in other parts of the company, which are totally valuable, things like working with schools or going to help in sort of an old folks home or something like that. I said, why don't we play to our skills, to do with technology, and why don't we do it with our partners as well? So why don't we make it all of the people who provide the IT service in Rolls-Royce? Why don't we together do an outreach project?
So look, we'll come on to that working together angle in a moment, but just very quickly, I have some experience of trying to get innovative projects off the ground within a large enterprise. Not obviously to the extent that you do, but I have some insight, and it can be difficult to get people to commit time to stuff. They kind of say, "Yeah, it's a brilliant idea, totally behind it, but I've got X, Y, Z also on my desk. I don't have time right now." How have you managed to juggle that organizational BAU objective kind of aspect of things versus, I really want to put time into this because I feel that it can deliver something really valuable?
I suppose the big issue here is we kind of start with nothing, right? So I suppose this was that there is a community out there with affected by motor neurone disease who have very little. Even if we do a little, it will be probably quite a lot for that group. So for us, we tend to in my team, we tend to do this on a from Rolls-Royce's point of view. We give up a lunchtime a week, which is a Friday lunchtime, to focus on this. But there's strength in numbers, so it's not just us; it's all of our partner companies. And we did a thing which was the last agenda item, we called it. So if ever you had a meeting that would be looking like it's going to finish a few minutes early, the last agenda item would always be, how are things going with the project, and where are those little bits of time that we can fit this in. And much to my amazement, the thing that we've done through the combined efforts of all these companies is something quite big, by taking all of those little bits of effort and putting them together. If it was cycling, Team Sky would call it marginal gains, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
All these little bits add up to a greater whole.
It certainly sounds like a kind of a peloton working together. But
Yeah.
You mentioned there kind of the last agenda item piece. I think that's a really good hint for anyone in a leadership role trying to think about how you can move these things forward without it kind of becoming this overwhelming, all-consuming piece in itself, and just chipping away and, as you said, incremental gains. But the challenges that you've faced as a group, what would you say that you've managed to overcome? What have been the biggest hurdles that working as a community of organizations, working in partnership has allowed you to overcome?
The first thing I would say is, to your point about how you go about doing these sorts of things, I suppose it's to try. First off, try. If we hadn't have tried, we wouldn't be here where we are today. I suppose the second thing is that larger number of people thinking about the problem and that sharing it. It's not to be underestimated. The value to your group of having something that's not the usual commercial issues. The commercially loaded, are you delivering this today, or are you paying for this today, which is usually how many of these conversations revolve. We made this whole project, it was community outreach, and it had to be everything that we did was free, because then there's straight away there's no commercial issues, right? Because there's no profit to be made out of free. so we did that, and that took the pressure off immensely. That gave us a vehicle in all of those usual conversations with our suppliers and our group. And I should say this it started as a Rolls-Royce idea. It's so much more than that now. It's an entity in its own right. We call it the Next Gen Think Tank, which was to try and imagine what the next generation of people living with motor neurone disease, what would their life be like? And to get it to that came from that trying to take away and have a different way of looking at each other than the usual construct. And that's what we did successfully. And that's what's given rise to what is a pretty incredible project off the back of it. If we hadn't have changed the paradigm on the way we work with all the different people that were involved in this, I don't think we could have truly done something as different as we've done.
Look, Stuart has alluded to the project there. This is the end of the first part of this interview. Please do stay on the CIO Watercooler website. Have a look around. There is plenty more content, including the second part of this interview, where we go into I Will Always Be Me in a bit more detail. So do stay tuned for that. And thank you for joining us for today's interview.